Hey y'all, I got a question for you. What if Superman were evil? Yes, the classic conundrum. What if supervillains existed, but there were no heroes to fight them back? What would happen? Well, you'd probably be looking at a YA dystopia. Alright, so Brandon Sanderson, love that man. Probably read like more than a dozen of his books at this point. I really love almost all of them. He's just a great guy all around. So I decided to read Steelheart, which is the first book in the Reckoners series, which is a YA series he released in the past decade or so. Now, I don't typically go for YA stuff. The only reason I really cared to check this one out is because, of course, it was Sanderson, and I've actually already read his other YA books, The Arithmetist and the Skyward series, and I really like those. I don't think those being for a YA demographic really hurt them at all. That's why I was pretty confident that I would like The Reckoners as well. And I was actually going to save this for a mini review, just, get my brief little thoughts on it, because I thought I wouldn't have much to say. But here we are. So this story takes place in New Chicago. So Chicago, but it's new. This is 10 years after the Calamity. A giant ball of light appeared in the sky, and it gave random people around the planet superpowers. And these people are known simply as epics. They have all the classics, flight, super strength, super speed. Some people are translucent. Some people are illusionists, can make people see things. Wide variety. They all have a specific weakness, but they're also super powerful and do a good job hiding that weakness. So once this happened, they did probably what you would expect and take over the world. So now, 10 years later, the United States of America is a totalitarian hellscape, and New Chicago, where our main character, 18-year-old David, lives, is ruled by the one and only Homelander, Steelheart. And David has a personal beef with Steelheart, because he actually killed his father back 10 years ago when this whole thing started. But the thing is, Steelheart has killed a lot of people. Most people know someone who was killed by Steelheart. David doesn't seem special. However, there is one thing that actually sets him apart. On that day where Steelheart broke into a bank, killed everyone there, including his father, he saw Steelheart bleed. Something on that day exposed Steelheart's weakness, and he knows that with a little bit of help, he might be able to figure out what it is. And thankfully, there is help available, as the Reckoners, a group of anti-epic rebels, are in town, and they're here to stir some shit up. And David reaches out to them to join their ranks so he can help them taking down epics, to eventually work their way up to Steelheart and take him out as well. So I'll say this, I think the start of this book was really good. Like, it starts with the, flashback of, David's father getting killed by Steelheart, and it was really intense, a lot more so than I was expecting. And I thought it really set the stage for this world and these characters. Steelheart was an absolutely terrifying villain when he was first introduced. And I enjoyed learning about what David's life was like in this new world they're living in. How the epics rule with an iron fist, how people are terrified of them, and how rebelling against them in any way is super dangerous. So all this work David has done on the side to gather intel on all of these heroes that he can present to the Reckoners to join their ranks, like, he is constantly risking his life. It really gives the whole story this suspenseful vibe that at any moment an epic can just pop down and blow someone's head off. Now, a lot of this is probably reminding you of The Boys, which is another series about evil superheroes and a gang of rebels who is working to take them down. They even have a French person. And yeah, it's probably likely that some influence did come from The Boys. Okay, this was before the show came out. I do like that show, but this would probably be more inspired by The Boys comic, which was out at the time. I actually think that comic is pretty, bad? I haven't read much of it, but I read enough to just be like, no thank you. But yeah, there is definitely some inspiration here, though the tone is very much different. And I think different in a better way. Though here's the thing about Steelheart, and I started to realize it about halfway through. This is why I don't usually read YA. Yes, well, his other YA books did some really unique things and didn't really rely on tropes of the demographic genre. This one sort of does. David is a very edgy boy. He is hell-bent on revenge and vengeance to a comical degree, and this is a common trope where, there's a character like this, super focused on revenge, and then eventually they learn revenge isn't everything. Well, he knows knows that. Like, he is very self-aware how, ridiculous he sometimes sounds, but he also doesn't care. My vengeance, I must destroy Steelheart. He killed my father. He's like, I know I sound a bit silly, but, just let me be me. And they're like, yeah, no, go for it. Of course, one of the Reckoners, Megan, is around his age, and of course, he falls in love with her, like seemingly at first sight, and a lot of his internal monologuing about her made me want to die. And she's like, hey, David, how's it going? And he's like, in his head, he's like, oh, what I want to say to her is that she looks smoking hot right now, but I won't, because I'm too focused on my vengeance. So yeah, characters, a bit cliche, not super likable. I also found the world to be a bit surprisingly underdeveloped for Sanderson. And there are just a lot of things I'm questioning that don't particularly add up. This one is a bit of a smaller nitpick, but it's one that really bugs me and sort of exemplifies everything, okay? Sanderson often comes up with his own swear words in his books. Which is actually kind of fun. In each of his books, they take place in these wildly different fantasy worlds, so it sort of makes sense that people will have developed language differently than us. And it also helps him get away with not necessarily filling his book with profanity. But here, he does the same thing, and it doesn't really work at all, or make any sense, because they've only been living in this dystopian hellscape for 10 years. Like, David was at least really young, but why would all of these adults be, like, adopting these new swear words? Why just say f***? Little stuff like that just bugged me, and it all around led me to not really care about the story and characters that much. I do think their strategies were cool. I did like seeing them, take out certain epics, learning how to exploit their weaknesses and all that. But the epics are never really around long enough to leave much of an impact on you. They usually show up for the first time and then get killed. I did mention that Steelheart made a really great first impression at the start of the series. He just has this really menacing, unpredictable presence. But you literally don't see him again until the very end of the book. And it leaves him feeling just like a really underdeveloped villain. I'll point to The Boys again, this time the show, where you have Homelander, who is such a terrifying force. And that's not just because of his powers, but it's because of, the performance and the character writing, how much depth there is to him. That's the potential that Steelheart could have had. And now spoilers for this book if anyone cares. Yeah, so they kill Steelheart. Yeah, like, his weakness is that you have to not be afraid of him when you kill him. A lot of them are pretty, cryptic and vague like that, but yeah, So he goes out without really much of a fight, and then of course it's revealed Megan, the girl he has a crush on, was actually an epic and a spy for Steelheart, so there's all this conflict there. The leader of the Reckoners was also actually an epic, and this reveal was something I just didn't really like, and that was how they reveal the reason there are no good epics, why all of them seem evil, is because the Calamity, when it turned people into epics, using their powers actually does make them evil. It changes something in them and makes them more aggressive and angry. And so all of these epics who are monsters and everything are actually kind of victims. When the story started, it felt like it would be more of an interesting take on human nature and showing that, if people get superpowers, people just aren't going to do good things because people are horrible. And what happens if, people who are already horrible, get a hold of these powers. But no, it's literally just, you get the powers, you're evil now. And I'm sure they're going to use that to set up, Prof, the leader of the Reckoners, being a villain in the next one or something. But I probably don't really care to read anymore, if I'm being honest. Yeah, this one, while I didn't have super high hopes for it, it was still pretty disappointing coming from one of my favorite authors. That being said, what can you do? The man puts out so many books, so many of them are really great, that I don't really care if some of them are misses for me. I feel like if I was more, in the demographic this was actually directed at, I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but for now, probably two stars. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this one, even if you are a YA reader. I think The Arithmetist and Skyward were way better. So with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. You can leave your thoughts on anything Sanderson in the comments down below. Have you read this book? What do you think about it? Because I'm curious to see. And next time, we will be doing The Blade itself.